Every morning, your child stands at the edge of the driveway, backpack slung over one shoulder, sneakers tapping nervously on the sidewalk. The school bus pulls up with a creak of brakes and the familiar hiss of air. The driver nods. The doors swing open. And instead of stepping on, your child simply shakes his head, turns around, and walks away. Day after day. No explanation. No excuses. Just an unshakable refusal to get on that bus. At first, you might think it's anxiety, maybe a phase, or even simple rebellion. But what if I told you the truth is something you'd never imagine? Something far darker than any parent ever wants to hear. This is the story of a young boy who refused to ride the school bus, and the shocking secret his mother uncovered when she finally decided to follow him. You're not just watching this for entertainment. You're watching this because your instincts told you something was wrong the moment you saw the title. And trust me, you were right. Hey there, and welcome. I know stories like these are tough. They hit you in the gut, especially if you're a parent, an older sibling, a teacher, someone who looks at kids and sees innocence, trust, and vulnerability. Today's video isn't just a story, it's a mirror. It reflects something many of us overlook in our day-to-day lives, the quiet signals, the subtle red flags, the moments we tell ourselves it's nothing, when deep down, we know it is something. In this video, you're going to find out exactly what that mother discovered when she followed her son that morning. No half stories. No clickbait. No dragging you along for 20 minutes just to give you 5 seconds of real info. You came for the truth, and by the end of this video, you're going to get it. But to truly feel the weight of what happened, you need to know how it all began. Let me take you back to a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Spokane, Washington. You know the kind, tree-lined streets, 2-car garages, neat lawns, and neighbors who wave, but don't really know each other. Safe. Comfortable. The kind of place where bad things aren't supposed to happen. That's where we meet Angela Miller, a single mother doing her best to raise her 9-year-old son, Carter. Angela worked remotely as a customer service manager for a retail chain. Her routine was tight, structured. Wake up at 6, breakfast by 7, Carter out the door by 7:40. Bus arrives at 7:45. She'd watch him board from the kitchen window while sipping her first cup of coffee. Every morning, like clockwork. Until one Monday in early September, everything changed. Carter didn't get on the bus. It was so subtle at first that Angela almost missed it. She saw the yellow bus pull up, saw the doors open, and then saw Carter just standing there, frozen. No wave, no goodbye, no love you, Mom. He turned on his heel and walked back toward the house. When she met him at the door, his excuse was almost too casual. I forgot something. But something in his voice didn't sit right. It was tight. Guarded. You know that tone when a kid's not lying exactly but they're hiding something. Angela shrugged it off. Gave him a ride. Didn't think much of it. But the next day? Same thing. And the day after that. And then the next. And every time she asked why, his answer became more and more vague. The bus smells weird. The driver's mean. I like riding with you better. Still, no obvious signs of bullying. No behavior changes, at least not right away. But if you're a parent watching this, I know you've felt it. That prickling feeling in the back of your neck when something isn't adding up. That quiet dread. That voice in your head that whispers, what if there's more to this? Angela tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was having trouble at school. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe she was overreacting. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Carter wasn't talking. Not to her. Not to his teachers. Not even to his best friend, Aiden, who lived across the street. His smiles were getting more forced. He started waking up at night, drenched in sweat. He had bags under his eyes, like he wasn't sleeping at all. When she brought up therapy, he clammed up completely. And through all this, he never got on that bus again. Not once. That's when Angela made a decision that would change everything. She was done guessing. She was done waiting. One morning, she told Carter she had an early meeting and wouldn't be able to drive him. She told him the only option was the bus. She even pretended to leave for work. But she didn't go far. She parked her car 2 streets down and waited. Camera rolling. Breath held. She watched as her son stood at the stop, just like every morning. watched the bus approach, watched the doors open, and then she followed. Now listen, what happens next is going to shake you. It's the kind of thing that makes you look at the world differently. And I promise, you're going to see it all unfold step by step. I want you to stay with me, because I'm not just going to tell you what Angela saw. I'm going to show you how easy it is for any of us to miss what's right in front of our eyes. This story isn't just about one boy or one school bus. It's about how darkness can hide in the most ordinary places. It's about trust, about fear, about a child who tried to speak without saying a word, and a mother who finally listened. This video is going to dig deep into what really happened on that bus. We'll talk about the driver, the school's response, and the shocking discovery Angela made when she finally confronted the truth. We'll examine the psychological toll it took on Carter and what experts now say could have happened if Angela hadn't acted when she did. You'll hear real quotes from child safety advocates, get insight into how predators exploit systems we think are safe, and most importantly, you'll leave this video knowing the warning signs and how to protect the kids in your life. Before we go any further, I want to say something directly to you. Yes, you, watching this right now. If you've ever felt like your gut was trying to tell you something, but the world around you kept saying, you're overthinking it, this story is for you. If you've ever sensed something was off with your child, your student, your neighbor's kid, but didn't know what to do or say, this video is your sign to listen to that instinct. And if you've ever thought, that could never happen in my town, in my neighborhood, with my kid, I need you to understand, that's exactly what they count on. That blind spot, that disbelief, that moment of hesitation. We're going to peel back the layers in this video, but not just to uncover the truth. We're going to learn. We're going to grow more aware. We're going to make sure that Carter's story isn't just another sad headline buried in the internet. Because what happened to him matters. And what Angela did next, well, that's where the real story begins. So settle in. You're going to want to watch this all the way through. This is more than a mystery. It's a wake-up call. And by the time you reach the end, you're going to be stunned, angry, heartbroken, and hopefully more alert than ever before. But just when Angela thought she'd seen enough, just when she was about to pull over and confront the situation right then and there, something happened. Something she hadn't planned for. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about her son's school and the people in charge of keeping him safe. And that is where the nightmare truly begins. Angela's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than she realized as she trailed the yellow school bus at a cautious distance. Her eyes flicked back and forth from the road to her rearview mirror, heart pounding with a kind of dread that only a parent truly understands. The bus didn't take the normal route. That was the first thing that stood out. Instead of heading toward the main intersection and making the usual turn onto Pine Avenue, the path Carter had been taking for the past 2 years, it veered off down a side street, past an old chain-link fence surrounding an abandoned lot. Angela frowned. She knew this neighborhood. Or, at least she thought she did. The route wasn't on any of the school's bus schedules she had seen during orientation. And yet, here it was, picking up a few kids at a stop that didn't even have a signpost. The kids climbed aboard without saying a word, almost as if rehearsed. None of them were talking. None of them were laughing. Just silent, somber faces disappearing behind thick, tinted glass. As she followed, questions began flooding Angela's mind. Was this even an official school route? Was the driver even employed by the district? Her fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to call the school, the police, someone. But something told her to wait, to watch a little longer. And so she did. For the next several minutes, she kept her distance, heart racing as the bus wound through unfamiliar streets, stopping at random places that didn't resemble proper bus stops at all. What kind of route was this? And why had Carter never said a word about it before? The more Angela followed, the more her thoughts spiraled back to the previous weeks, trying to piece together moments she'd dismissed too quickly. There had been subtle changes. Carter had started drawing less. He used to spend hours sketching superheroes and comic book panels, but recently his notebooks were filled with messy, angry scribbles. He wasn't playing video games as much either, not even his favorite racing game, which once had him cheering at the screen in excitement. His behavior had become quieter, withdrawn. He avoided eye contact when she asked him how school was. Sometimes, he'd flinch when she touched his shoulder unexpectedly. All of it pointed to something more than nerves or preference. Something unspoken. Something buried. She thought about his teachers. Mrs. Dawson had once mentioned that Carter had become more introverted during class, choosing to sit in the back and often asking to go to the nurse for minor complaints. Angela had chalked it up to growing pains, a developing personality, the emotional roller coaster that comes with being 9 years old. But now, every tiny behavioral shift echoed in her memory, like warning bells she had ignored. And then there were his friendships, or more accurately, the quiet collapse of them. Aiden, his best friend since kindergarten, had suddenly stopped coming over. Angela had casually asked his mother if everything was okay between the boys, and she'd hesitated before replying, "I think Aiden's just processing some things."
Kids are weird sometimes, right?
At the time, it felt like a throwaway line. But looking back, Angela wondered, had something happened between them? Had Aiden seen something? Experienced something? Or worse, had he been part of something? The bus made another odd turn, this time into a wooded service road that led behind a cluster of commercial buildings. This wasn't normal. This was no school route. Angela's grip tightened again as she slowed to a crawl, staying far enough back not to be noticed. The trees grew denser on either side of the road, shadowing the street in eerie silence. And then the bus stopped. Not in front of a school. Not even a public space. Just a derelict building, overgrown with weeds and vines, windows boarded up, the kind of place that whispered warnings to anyone passing by. Angela's blood ran cold. What was a school bus doing here? And then the unexpected happened. The bus doors opened, and kids began filing off, Carter included. But they didn't scatter. They didn't run toward a building or gather near a teacher. Instead, they lined up, one by one, as if waiting for instructions. At the front of the line stood the driver, an older man with dark glasses and a stiff, unnatural posture. He spoke to them in low tones Angela couldn't hear from her car. Then, one by one, he directed them toward a narrow side entrance of the building, an entrance partially hidden behind a rusted dumpster and a tangle of ivy. Carter hesitated before entering, glancing over his shoulder for a brief moment. His expression wasn't one of fear, but confusion. Like he didn't quite understand why he kept coming back. And then he disappeared inside. Angela's thoughts were a tornado. Should she confront the driver? Call 911? Storm in after her son? Every instinct screamed at her to act, but something stronger, the urge to know the whole truth before risking everything, kept her rooted. She needed answers. She needed to understand. But she also needed to be smart. Whatever this was, it was bigger than she thought. As she sat in her car, hidden behind the tree line, she remembered a story that had gone semi-viral a few months ago, a trending YouTube video about a similar case in Michigan. A kid had stopped taking the bus, citing a strange room he was taken to after school. That video had been brushed off by the public, labeled an internet hoax, a fake story for clicks, until police finally investigated and found something real. Something disturbing. Angela's mind swam with that memory. Was this another case like that? Was Carter trying to protect her by not saying anything? Or had he been threatened? She also couldn't shake off one more thought, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about Carter at all. Maybe he was just a piece of a much larger puzzle. Maybe there were others involved. Teachers? Administrators? What if someone had been watching Carter from the start, someone he trusted? What if it wasn't the driver at all, but someone inside that building? A supervisor, a handler, someone pulling the strings? Then came another memory. A few weeks back, Carter had mentioned a new after-school program they were starting for kids who needed extra help. Angela had never signed a form, never received a call, never heard about it from the school itself. She'd brushed it off at the time, assuming it was just a miscommunication. But now it clicked. What if that program wasn't sanctioned? What if it wasn't on school grounds at all? Angela's thoughts spiraled deeper as the minutes passed. The longer she sat and waited, the more questions unraveled in her mind, each more chilling than the last. Was Carter being watched? Were they grooming these children for something under the guise of education or counseling? Could it be part of a larger underground operation exploiting children while hiding behind the mask of school transportation? And yet, for every horrifying theory that flashed through her mind, a part of her doubted. What if she was overreacting? What if the building was a satellite classroom or a neglected annex the school used temporarily? What if the driver was simply doing his job and this was all just a poorly communicated logistical decision? These red herrings, the what-ifs, were dangerous. They made people second-guess themselves. They made them stay silent. And silence, in stories like this, is the perfect cover for monsters. Angela knew that if she wanted the truth, she'd have to go deeper. This wasn't the end of the road. It was only the beginning. There was more to uncover. Layers beneath the surface, faces behind the masks, and intentions far darker than anything she had yet imagined. And then a shadow moved behind the broken glass window on the second floor of the building. Angela sat up straight. Someone was watching, but not from inside the bus and not one of the kids. This was someone else entirely. Someone she hadn't seen before. Someone who had just seen her. And at that moment she realized she wasn't the only one doing the watching. Angela's journey toward the truth had seemed clear after they escaped the compound, but the deeper she dug, the more her world began to unravel in ways she hadn't expected. The first red flag came when she tried to reach out to a former colleague of Mark's, someone who had worked with him on the early stages of the project. She had a name, a phone number, and a faint hope that this person might offer some answers. When she called, however, the line was abruptly cut off after a few seconds of static. No voicemail, no trace, just silence. She dialed again and again, but it was as if the number had never existed. For the first time since she'd broken free, a wave of cold panic washed over her. What was happening? Who was controlling this narrative, even now? Determined not to let this setback stop her, Angela turned to the files they had recovered before the servers were wiped. But when she went to retrieve the hard drive, it was gone. Vanished. The locked box where she had hidden it under her floorboards was wide open, its contents removed. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, just an eerie emptiness. It was as if someone had been inside her house without her knowing. She checked her windows, doors, and every hidden corner. Nothing out of place. Yet the absence of that crucial evidence was a loud scream in the quiet.
Who could have gotten to it?
Who knew exactly where she had hidden it? Her frustration deepened, but she refused to give in. She had to find a way to get back on track. She called Beth, the one ally who had stuck with her through the darkest parts of their escape. But when she answered, the conversation was not what Angela expected. Beth's voice was distant, almost robotic. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Angela, but you need to stop.
Now.
It's too dangerous. I can't help you anymore." Angela's heart skipped a beat. Beth had always been the one person she could rely on, the one person who had stood up against Klein's forces when it counted. The fact that she was now actively warning her off, telling her to stop looking, sent chills down her spine. What had changed? Why had Beth suddenly pulled back? The following day, Angela's phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, a string of digits and letters she couldn't trace. The message was simple but chilling. "Stop digging, or the next one will disappear." No context, no signature, just an implicit threat. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Who was behind this? Had the people she thought were on her side been playing a much darker game all along? Angela had always suspected that she was up against more than just the government. There had been whispers of underground organizations, rogue factions within the system, people who had no interest in the truth coming out. But now, the threat felt real. Too real. That night, as Angela tried to push forward with her research, something even stranger happened. She sat at her desk, scanning through encrypted emails she had somehow managed to retrieve from the dark web, when the lights flickered. A power surge, she thought. But then, the screen froze. For a moment, she thought it was just a glitch, but as she tried to reboot, the computer came back to life with a single image on the screen, a photo of her. It wasn't one she recognized. It was an old photo, faded and blurry, showing her as a young woman sitting in a hospital room with Mark beside her, smiling. The caption underneath was simple, yet it sent a shockwave through her. Phase 1. Project Initial. The picture was taken years before Carter was even born, before she had ever heard of Klein or the experiments, before she had even known she was part of something much larger than she could imagine. The implications were terrifying. Had she been manipulated before? Was this whole life a fabrication? Angela felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting. Her past, her memories, could they have been implanted just like Carter's? Could it be that she had been a part of the experiment from the very beginning, a project in her own right? The questions were relentless. Was the love she shared with Mark real, or had it been designed? Had she been a subject in this grand experiment without even realizing it? She needed answers, but she was beginning to wonder if the truth was something she could ever fully comprehend. Every piece of the puzzle led to more questions, more twists. She had already uncovered more than most could dream of, but the deeper she went, the more elusive it became. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always one step ahead of her. Every ally, every lead, every connection she thought she had was either unreliable or had its own dark agenda. The weight of the mystery was becoming unbearable, and Angela had to make a choice, whether to walk away for good and try to protect Carter from a world that was already too broken, or push forward into the abyss, risking everything for the truth. But something inside her, some fierce maternal instinct, told her there was no turning back now. She had to finish what she started. As she sat in the dim light of her apartment, thinking about the next move, a knock echoed at the door. Her heart skipped. Was it someone she could trust, or was it another threat, another warning to back off? She opened it cautiously. Standing in the doorway was a familiar face, Beth, but her expression was different now. She was trembling, and her eyes were wide with panic. "They know," Beth whispered, her voice barely audible. "They've found me, Angela. They're coming for us. It's already started." Before Angela could react, Beth's eyes flickered to something behind her, a sharp movement that sent Angela's heart racing. And then, without another word, Beth turned and fled into the night. What was happening? Who had found Beth, and why was she suddenly in danger? Angela was more determined than ever to uncover the truth, but now, she was faced with an impossible question. Could she trust anyone anymore? Or was the conspiracy even larger than she ever imagined? The answer seemed closer than ever, but with every step forward, Angela's world was becoming darker, more dangerous. And with Beth's sudden disappearance, it was clear. The story wasn't over. It had just become more complicated than she ever anticipated. Angela didn't know how long she sat frozen behind the wheel, eyes fixed on that broken second-story window where the shadow had just flickered. Every nerve in her body told her to leave, drive off, get help, do anything but stay in this overgrown, decaying lot surrounded by trees and silence. But something deeper, an almost primal instinct, refused to let her move. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. As the moments dragged, she suddenly noticed movement in her peripheral vision. A car, an older black sedan with no visible plates, pulled out from behind the building and rolled slowly down the opposite end of the road, vanishing into the woods. It hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, and she'd just been too focused on the bus. Angela's stomach tightened. That car wasn't random. Someone had been watching everything, including her. That night, Angela barely slept. She kept checking Carter's room, watching him sleep peacefully, clueless to the storm surrounding them. Her mind was overloaded with everything she'd witnessed, the strange bus route, the boarded-up building, the silent kids, and now, the unmarked car and the figure behind the glass. She knew she had to act fast, but carefully. Going to the school outright might trigger the wrong kind of attention. She needed evidence, solid, irrefutable proof. So she planned. She dug out an old camera with a zoom lens, charged her phone, and mentally prepared herself for the next morning. But she wasn't the only one who'd been disturbed by recent events. The next day, as she was preparing to follow the bus again, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Aiden's mother, Melissa. They hadn't spoken in weeks. The message was brief but chilling. "Did Carter say anything to you? Aiden's been having nightmares again." Drew another picture of the man in the hat. "Same one from last time. We need to talk." Angela's blood ran cold. Carter had once mentioned a man with a hat too, a tall figure who stood too still and smelled like burned wires. She dismissed it as childhood imagination. Now it didn't feel so imaginary. Angela met Melissa later that afternoon at a park they both used to bring the boys to. Melissa looked exhausted, pale, stressed, her eyes darting around like she was afraid of being followed. They talked in hushed tones, trying not to attract attention. That's when Melissa pulled something out of her bag, a sketch Aiden had drawn just the night before. It showed a tall, thin figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat, standing in front of what looked like an old building with a broken window. Angela's hands trembled as she recognized it instantly. It was the same building she had followed the bus to. Aiden had never been there, at least not recently. How could he draw it in such detail? Then Melissa dropped a bombshell. Aiden had gone to that exact place last year, briefly enrolled in a special learning program the school claimed was for kids with behavioral development needs. The school had convinced her it was temporary, off-campus, and strictly educational. But Aiden had changed afterward. He stopped smiling as much, developed sleepwalking episodes, started referring to a room with mirrors, where the rules were different. Melissa had eventually pulled him out after a month, and the school quietly dropped the program without explanation. No paperwork. No follow-up. It was as if it never happened. Angela's mind reeled. This wasn't new. It had happened before. And worse, the school was involved, or at least pretending not to notice. She realized then that whatever was going on wasn't limited to her son. It had a pattern, maybe even a cycle. Kids brought into this program, changed in ways no one wanted to talk about, and then returned with sealed lips and haunted eyes. That night, as Angela began digging deeper online, she stumbled upon a local forum, mostly parents, teachers, and community members discussing district changes, PTA meetings, and local school events. One thread caught her attention. It was from over a year ago and had very few replies. A user named Watcher126 had posted cryptic messages about a phantom route, claiming their niece had taken a school bus to a building that wasn't listed on any official maps. They described a similar figure in a hat, a group of silent children, and mysterious changes in their niece's behavior. The thread had abruptly ended with a final post. "They know I've been asking. If anything happens, look into room 4B. Don't let them erase her." No other details. Just silence. Angela tried messaging the user, but the account had been deleted. The next day, she returned to the school under the pretense of volunteering in the front office. As she sorted paperwork, she overheard two staff members whispering in the break room. One mentioned an audit coming up and how they had to make sure no flagged names were in the system anymore. The tone wasn't casual. It was careful, cautious, and layered with unspoken meaning. Angela jotted down what she could, then quietly slipped into the records room while the secretary was distracted. She searched for Carter's name and found it in two files, one standard enrollment, the other marked confidential. When she tried to print the second one, the screen suddenly froze. An error message blinked. "Access restricted. Report generated." She backed away slowly, heart racing. Someone had been notified. That night, she received a call from a blocked number. She hesitated before answering, and a distorted voice simply said, "Stop digging. Carter's safe, for now. Not all children are chosen. Be grateful." The call ended before she could speak. Her knees buckled. They were watching her. And worse, they knew she was getting close. But what did chosen mean? Why Carter? Why Aiden? What were they looking for? She tried confiding in Melissa, but the next morning, Melissa didn't respond to texts. Her voicemail was full. Angela drove to her house, only to find the driveway empty and the front door wide open. Inside, there were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no overturned furniture. Just silence. But on the kitchen counter sat Aiden's drawing of the man in the hat, burned around the edges as if someone tried to destroy it. And in that moment, Angela realized something terrifying. She wasn't just uncovering a secret, she was becoming part of it. Angela's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she sat in the darkened car outside Melissa's house, her mind spinning in 1,000 directions. The open front door. The eerie silence. The burned drawing on the kitchen counter. None of it added up, and all of it felt wrong. Melissa would never just leave without telling someone, especially not with Aiden already having episodes again. Angela stared at the empty driveway, her breath catching in her throat every time she imagined someone stepping out from the shadows or peering through one of the windows. She knew she couldn't go back inside, not without calling someone, but she also knew that calling the police wouldn't get her the answers she needed. They'd ask routine questions, file a missing persons report, and dismiss her fears as speculation. No one was going to believe that a school bus, a silent group of children, and a man in a hat had anything to do with Melissa's disappearance. Angela wasn't even sure she believed it herself, until her phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Melissa's number. A single photo.
Blurry.
Low resolution. But unmistakable. A figure stood in what looked like an old, tiled hallway, too narrow to be a school corridor, too run down to be any kind of facility open to the public. The figure was tall, thin, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. No face. Just a dark blur where features should have been. Behind him, barely visible through the darkness, was a child. Angela's heart dropped. It was Carter's red hoodie. Angela slammed the car into gear and drove off, trying not to break down behind the wheel. Everything in her life was shattering at once. She raced home, hoping beyond reason that Carter would still be there, asleep in his bed, clutching the stuffed dinosaur he never let go of. But when she flung open the front door and ran upstairs, the room was empty. The window was cracked open. The bed covers pulled halfway to the floor, like someone had left in a hurry, or had been taken. Her breath turned to ice. This was no longer a mystery. This was an abduction. And worse, she had no idea who to turn to. She called 911, but her words came out jumbled, panicked. She tried explaining what had happened, about the drawing, the school bus, the strange building, the burned picture, but even as the dispatcher tried to keep her calm, Angela could feel the skepticism over the line. They promised to send someone over, but her gut told her it wouldn't help. By the time officers arrived, the house would be clean. The trail would be cold. The people behind this were careful, calculated. They knew how to erase things and people without a trace. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one was a video, just a few seconds long. The screen was mostly dark, but a flickering light revealed tiled walls and a single chair bolted to the center of the floor. The camera moved slightly, then stopped, focusing on what looked like a series of mirrors lining the wall. In one of the reflections, Carter stood with a blank expression, his arms at his sides, his lips moving, but there was no sound. The video ended abruptly. Angela felt like she couldn't breathe. Someone was playing with her, and they wanted her to know it. Over the next few days, the walls seemed to close in around her. The police were of no help. They filed the report but found no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints. It was as if Carter had simply vanished into thin air. Angela tried going back to the school, demanding to speak to the principal, but she was told he was on leave indefinitely. No reason given. The school staff gave her tight smiles, hushed voices, and offered her brochures for grief counselors. It was like they were preparing for her to accept the worst. But Angela refused. She knew her son was alive. She'd seen him in the video. She just didn't know where or how to reach him. Paranoia became her new normal. Every time she walked outside, she felt eyes on her. Black cars began appearing near her house, parked down the street, engine running. When she approached them, they'd drive away, slow and deliberate. One day, her mail was scattered across the porch, torn open like someone had gone through it. Even worse, she began finding items moved around in her home. Drawers open, lights left on that she hadn't touched. They weren't trying to hide. They were trying to break her down. It worked. Angela stopped sleeping. Her hands shook constantly. She began carrying a kitchen knife with her, even inside the house. Every sound made her jump. But amid the fear, one emotion began to eclipse all others: determination. Whoever these people were, whatever this program was, they had underestimated a mother's resolve. Angela would not stop until she found her son. But time was running out. Late one night, as she sifted through old files from Carter's school, she found something she hadn't noticed before. It was an outdated permission slip tucked between two old report cards. The heading was faded, almost unreadable, but the logo in the corner caught her attention. It wasn't the school's official logo. It was different. More industrial, like something used by a government contractor or a private firm. The permission slip mentioned a pilot program for advanced sensory development through immersive environments. No teacher names, no clear location, just a note that said, "Transport will be provided via Route Z," and a line at the bottom that read, "Room 4B access pending parental signature." The signature line was blank. She never signed this.
So who did?
Suddenly, a noise came from the hallway, something shifting. Angela froze. Her house had been quiet all night. She stepped carefully toward the door, her ears straining. Another sound, this time closer, like someone dragging something across the floor. She tightened her grip on the knife, stepped into the hall, and stopped cold. There, written in thick black marker across the wall, was a single word:
Choice.
It hadn't been there before. Angela's heart pounded. She backed away, only to hear her phone buzzing in the bedroom behind her. She turned and ran back, grabbed it off the bed. A new message. No number. Just 3 words. One more chance. She didn't know what it meant. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty now. This wasn't just about Carter. They wanted her to come next. Angela sat in the corner of her dimly lit kitchen, clutching the mysterious permission slip like it was a ticking time bomb. The word choice still stained the hallway wall like a threat written in blood, and her phone, still unlocked, kept flashing the message. One more chance. It was impossible to make sense of. Her heart thudded in her chest as she flipped the paper over for the 100th time, searching for a watermark, a hidden code, anything. And that's when she noticed it, barely visible under the right light, in the curve of the letter Z in Route Z, a small emblem she'd seen before, but had never understood. A triangle within a circle. She'd seen it years ago, on a letter her husband received before he left. A letter she wasn't supposed to open. Back then, she dismissed it as some job offer or government form, and when he vanished with no explanation, she thought it was abandonment. But now, staring at the same symbol on Carter's school papers, her stomach dropped. This wasn't new. This went back years. Maybe decades. And just like that, the story she thought she was living cracked wide open. The sound of a car engine outside drew her attention. She peered through the blinds and froze. A woman was standing at the end of her driveway.
Blonde. Pale.
Dressed in a school district windbreaker with an outdated logo. Angela recognized her instantly. It was Miss Park, Carter's old bus driver from 2 years ago, the one who left suddenly without explanation after Carter started refusing rides. Angela hadn't seen or heard from her since. But now here she was, standing perfectly still, looking straight at the house. Angela rushed to the door and flung it open, demanding answers. Miss Park didn't move. She simply raised her hand and held out a plastic folder. No words, no eye contact. Just the silent offering. Then she turned and walked away like nothing happened. Inside the folder were 2 photos, grainy security stills, each marked with a date and time. The first was from 4 years ago. A young boy, Carter, unmistakably, stood at a building entrance Angela didn't recognize, flanked by 2 adults with their backs turned. The timestamp matched a week when Carter had been sick and home from school, or so she thought. The second photo was worse. It was from just 2 weeks ago. And in it, Angela saw something she couldn't explain. Herself, standing outside the same building. She had no memory of being there. But there she was, caught mid-step, looking over her shoulder, as if she had just come out and was checking to make sure she wasn't being followed. The walls of her reality started to crumble. She sat down hard, trying to piece it together. Was she being gaslit? Hypnotized? Had she been manipulated into forgetting? Or worse, was she a part of this and didn't even know it? She began tearing through old photos, receipts, any evidence of where she'd been over the past few weeks. Holes started appearing, days she couldn't account for, calls she thought she made that weren't in her history, errands she supposedly ran without any purchases to prove them. Her own mind had gaps in it. And for the first time, she wondered if this entire search for Carter had been orchestrated. Not by strangers, but by something she'd been unknowingly entangled in all along. The next blow came when she called Melissa's emergency contact, the only person she thought might still be able to help. But instead of a family member, a man answered.
Calm.
Cold. He introduced himself as Director Monroe and asked calmly why she was using a restricted number. When she said Melissa was missing and demanded to know what was going on, the man paused and said, "She was never authorized to contact you outside of protocol. That breach has been handled." Angela recoiled. Breach? Protocol? Melissa was her friend. Her only friend who had taken her seriously. And now she realized Melissa wasn't who she claimed to be. None of it made sense. The drawings, the burned photo, the fake panic, it had all been a setup. Maybe even the late-night phone calls, the babysitting favors, the quiet nudges to ask more questions. Melissa hadn't been investigating with her. Melissa had been guiding her, leading her towards something. Or perhaps, testing how far she'd go. Angela's heart broke as she realized there was a chance Melissa hadn't been abducted at all. She might have never been in danger. She might have just returned to wherever she came from. Mission complete. That thought made her sick, but it also lit a fire inside her. Because if Melissa had been part of a larger plan, if the photos and permissions and messages were all pieces of a puzzle carefully planted in her path, then there was only one logical conclusion. Angela wasn't a bystander. She was the key. And someone out there was desperate for her to remember something she'd forgotten. But just as she started digging through her own past, family photos, Carter's baby records, even hospital files, another twist emerged, one that made everything unravel in a way she never imagined. While scanning old records from the time Carter was born, Angela noticed something buried deep in his hospital file, an anomaly report, a flagged note, unusual neurological patterns detected, file forwarded to Department X. She didn't know what Department X was, but the same triangle inside circle symbol was stamped beside it. The file was redacted in places, but one thing was clear: someone had been watching Carter since the day he was born. Possibly even before. Suddenly, her entire life as a mother felt like a scripted lie. Every school they attended, every job she took, every home they lived in. What if she was selected?
Conditioned?
What if Carter wasn't just part of a program? What if she was? And just when Angela thought she had reached the edge of the truth, her phone buzzed again. A new message. This time, a voice recording. Melissa's voice. But she wasn't panicked or afraid. She was calm, cold, clinical. "You weren't supposed to dig this far, Angela. But now that you have, we'll need to accelerate your reintroduction. Welcome back to Phase 3. Angela dropped the phone as the lights in her house flickered and went dark. Everything she thought she knew had just been erased. Again, Angela couldn't feel her legs. She sat paralyzed in her kitchen chair, surrounded by the suffocating silence of her powerless house, the voice message from Melissa echoing on loop in her head. "We'll need to accelerate your reintroduction." It didn't even sound like Melissa anymore. The warmth had drained from her tone, replaced by clinical detachment, like a lab technician observing an animal's reaction inside an experimental maze. But Angela wasn't just reacting anymore. She was remembering. Slowly, painfully, in pieces that felt like they'd been locked behind an unbreakable wall. And the worst part? They weren't memories of strangers or distant people from some classified agency. They were of Mark, her husband, her son Carter, her entire family. The day Carter was born. The months that followed. The doctors who never gave clear answers. The strange disappearances in the medical records. The silent looks from nurses. And Mark's face when she asked too many questions. How his whole body would go still. How he'd look past her, like he was staring at someone else behind her shoulder. The realization hit like a gut punch. She had been lied to by the person she trusted the most. She slammed open the attic and climbed the creaky steps into the dark, forgotten crawl space, rummaging through old boxes that Mark had always insisted be left alone. One of them was padlocked, wrapped in layers of duct tape, with a faded shipping label addressed not to their current home, but to a P.O. box in a town they'd never lived in. She didn't even know how Mark got it into their attic. After finding a hammer, she pried it open and nearly dropped to her knees when she saw what was inside. Not just documents, but photographs, a ledger, audio cassettes, and an old ID badge with Mark's name. Only it didn't say he worked for an IT firm like he claimed. It said Logistical Supervisor, Division of Predictive Behavior, Level 2 clearance. It was dated before Carter was born. It wasn't just Mark who had secrets. It was their entire life. Every milestone, every school transfer, even their last relocation, all pre-selected, orchestrated. She knew she had to confront him. Mark wasn't scheduled to return from his business trip for another 2 days, but something inside her told her he was already back, just not home. So she called his phone. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Then she tried his old number, the one he'd supposedly retired when they moved. This time someone answered, but it wasn't Mark. It was the same cold male voice from earlier. "You shouldn't have opened the box," he said. "Your son's placement depends on your cooperation." Before she could respond, the line went dead. That night, Carter didn't speak a word at dinner. He just stared at his plate. When she asked what was wrong, he quietly said, "They told me not to say anything, that you'd forget again, and it would all be okay." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "It's not your fault, Mom. You didn't know." The way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about this week or the photos or the voice messages, but about something much deeper, something long buried, shattered her. Carter wasn't just a victim. He was aware. He'd been playing along, protecting her, just like someone had trained him to. Angela knew then that she was running out of time. Her son was slipping further into something she didn't recognize, and if she didn't act fast, they'd both be consumed. The next morning, she received a package on her porch. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a burner phone. The note was brief. "You have 24 hours to decide. Turn yourself in, and Carter's record will be wiped. Resist, and he remains a candidate. Your choice." That word again, choice. Except this time, it wasn't graffiti. It was a threat. A demand. A sick ultimatum that stripped her of all agency. Angela paced the kitchen floor for hours, the paper clenched in her hand. If she turned herself in, she might never see Carter again, but at least he'd have a chance at a normal life. If she resisted, whatever shadowy program had been tracking them would tighten its grip on him. He'd be locked into a future neither of them chose. But how could she trust anything they promised? They'd lied for years. Manipulated everything, even her own memories. Who's to say Carter would be safe? Desperate for answers, she called the one person she never thought she'd contact again, her estranged sister, Beth. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, but Beth had always been suspicious of Mark. Back then, Angela chalked it up to family drama and jealousy. Now, it seemed like Beth may have seen something Angela had been too blinded to notice. When Beth picked up and heard Angela's voice, she didn't sound surprised. "You waited too long," she said. "They've already initiated the transfer, haven't they?" The breath left Angela's lungs. "How do you know that?" she asked. There was a pause. Then Beth replied, "Because it happened to my daughter too. And I didn't stop it in time." The floor dropped out beneath Angela's feet. She wasn't the only one. Whatever this program was, it wasn't isolated. It wasn't new. It had been running for years, silently, under the radar, targeting children, families, manipulating generations. And now it was too big to fight from the outside. Her only hope was from within. But to do that, she'd have to give them what they wanted. The next morning, Angela stood outside the same concrete building from the surveillance photos. The same one from her forgotten memory. She held the burner phone in one hand and Carter's hand in the other. Her car, phone, and identity were all wiped clean, left behind. She looked down at her son. "Whatever happens next," she whispered, "I'll find a way to bring you back." But Carter didn't answer. He just stared forward and said, "They already know you're here." And then the front doors opened. Angela never imagined walking willingly into a place that had haunted her dreams for months, but as the heavy steel doors hissed open and that antiseptic, soulless air poured out like a forgotten tomb, she gripped Carter's hand tighter and stepped inside. The lobby was sterile and humming with unseen machinery, lined with glass walls that distorted shapes behind them, men and women in lab coats, children seated alone in white rooms, the low thrum of computers calculating things no normal parent should ever witness. She didn't need to be told that this was a research facility. It wasn't just for Carter. It was a hub for dozens, maybe hundreds of children. Children just like him.
Tracked. Groomed.
Rewired. Her knees trembled with a mix of rage and disbelief. This wasn't just a family's nightmare, it was a national secret. A man approached, tall, emotionless, wearing the same predictive behavior badge as the one she found in the attic. His name tag read Dr. Cyrus Klein. He didn't smile. He didn't even blink. "Angela Miller," he said, like he'd known her his whole life. "We've been expecting you." She didn't reply. She only glared. But Carter didn't flinch. In fact, he nodded like he recognized the man. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "This is part of it." That's when Angela's heart shattered again, because his voice didn't sound like her son's anymore. It was calm, measured, scripted, like someone who'd rehearsed those words. And worse yet, his eyes didn't match the terror of the moment. They held something else. Resignation. Klein gestured toward a long corridor. "We're past the point of avoidance," he said. "You were always meant to return." The words made Angela's head spin. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "Why my son? Why me?" But instead of answering, he handed her a tablet. On the screen was a blurry image of her, a young girl, maybe 15, hooked to machines in what looked like the same facility. "Because this didn't start with Carter," he said. "It started with you." The tablet flipped through images, each more damning than the last. Medical files, therapy notes, test results. Angela at different stages in life, none of which she remembered. "You were part of our behavioral pilot study in 1995, Klein said. "You were extracted, scrubbed, and reassigned to observe the long-term impacts of memory suppression and free will reconditioning. Mark was your handler. Carter was your subject. You weren't just part of the experiment. You were built for it." Her whole body went cold. The life she thought she lived wasn't hers. Her marriage, her family, her decisions, they were all pre-scripted variables in an experiment so vast and buried it operated beyond the reach of law, ethics, or reality. She tried to step back, to process, but the hallway seemed to close in on her. Klein was still talking, something about intergenerational reinforcement patterns, about embedded autonomy trials, but she wasn't listening anymore. The horror of it drowned everything out. She had been a plant, a controlled test subject. Mark had never loved her. He was assigned to her. And Carter? Her own child had been designed, not conceived. They didn't just watch him, they built him. She turned to Carter, praying for some flicker of the boy she knew, but he just stared straight ahead. "You always said you'd protect me," he whispered, eyes glassy. "But they said if I told you too early, they'd reset everything." Angela dropped to her knees. "Carter, no, this isn't you. They did something to you. We can fight this together." But he shook his head. "You're not my real mom," he said. "You're my control." The words split her soul in half. Before she could react, armed guards entered the corridor. "The window's closing," Klein said. "You can either complete the cycle and resume your directive, or we begin a forced reboot. But either way, this ends tonight." That's when the pressure broke. Angela leapt at him, rage replacing fear, screaming for Carter to run. But Klein didn't flinch. Instead, someone behind her shouted, "Angela, stop." She froze. It was Beth. But not the Beth she remembered. This Beth was dressed like facility staff, ID badge clipped, earpiece in, hand raised like she had authority here. Angela's mind imploded. What is this? You said they took your daughter. Beth stepped forward cautiously.
They did, she said.
But they also gave her back, under conditions. I work for them now. I had no choice. Her voice cracked. I tried to warn you in my own way. But you kept digging. You made it worse. And now they won't let you leave. Angela staggered backward. The betrayal was total. She had no allies. No hope. Her sister was compromised. Her husband had been lying all along. Her son was slipping into something engineered. And she was the final piece in a puzzle that had been decades in the making. You don't get to choose anymore, Klein said. You're here because you were programmed to return. Carter's evolution is tied to your compliance. Then the hallway lights dimmed. An alarm sounded, and over the intercom, a chilling voice whispered, Phase 3 breached. External signal detected. Everyone froze. It wasn't part of the script. And for the first time, Angela saw fear in Klein's eyes. Something had gone wrong. Or maybe, finally, something had gone right. The alarm screamed like a warning from the depths of something ancient and broken, a sound that didn't belong in any modern facility. Red strobes flickered down the sterile hallway, distorting the faces of the guards as they drew their weapons and frantically scanned for a breach. But Angela wasn't frozen anymore. Her instincts had shifted from fear to fire. Whatever Phase 3 meant, it wasn't part of their controlled plan. It was chaos, and chaos was her only chance. She reached for Carter, but he pulled back, torn between programming and memory. She whispered his name again, not pleading this time, but with the tone only a real mother could deliver. Steady, full of fire and love. You are not their project. You are mine. Suddenly, the corridor doors blew open, and a wall of static rolled in like a digital fog. Sparks flew from the security panels. Lights shorted. Every screen flashed the same strange code, scrolling like an ancient language of ones and zeros, repeating one name again and again. Anomaly 0.0, Angela Miller. That's when she realized the breach hadn't come from outside. She was the breach. Klein had spent years shaping her path, crafting her world, designing every relationship and manipulating every emotion. But what they didn't account for was something messy, human, and utterly uncontrollable. Free will. Her mind had resisted just enough. Her love for Carter had stretched beyond the boundaries of programming. She wasn't just the subject of their experiment. She was the failure they never predicted. Klein screamed to shut the system down, but no one listened. Beth hesitated, caught between loyalty and conscience. The static deepened into a low-frequency hum, like something was waking up below them. Then, through the chaos, Carter grabbed Angela's hand. I remember now, he said, trembling. You used to sing to me when I had night terrors. You said no monster could survive that melody. Angela smiled through her tears. That's right, baby. And there's a monster here now.
They ran.
Not away, but toward the core. Behind the thick, reinforced door at the end of the hallway, Angela knew the truth was buried. The central server. The origin of every simulation, every behavioral trigger, every surveillance detail. They kept it deep, locked beneath layers of firewalls and steel. The guards gave chase, but Beth stepped in, finally choosing a side. She drew her weapon and turned it on her own team, shouting, You said you wouldn't hurt children, before disappearing into the storm of confusion. Angela and Carter reached the chamber, but the biometric lock required two identities, Angela's and Mark's. She slammed her hand down anyway. To her surprise, it worked. The door unsealed with a hiss of cold air and released a flood of white mist. Inside was something unlike anything Angela had imagined. Not just databanks or servers, but life. Dozens of sleeping children suspended in glass pods, each with a name, a story, a family they'd been taken from. Some looked just like Carter, and others they looked like her. Clones. Echoes. Experiments frozen in time. Monitors tracked neural activity, stress levels, even dream states. She felt sick. The realization hit hard. She wasn't the first Angela. She might not even be the original. She was a variant, a test, a walking hypothesis about nurture, memory, and resistance. And she was the only one who had ever made it this far. Klein appeared at the chamber door, disheveled and furious, gun raised and voice cracking. "You don't understand what you're doing," he shouted. This was never about torture. It was about preservation. Humanity is failing. We needed models for psychological resilience. You were the most promising variant, but you've infected the system with your maternal weakness. Angela stood her ground. "You don't get it. You tried to engineer resilience without emotion. But love is resilience." He cocked the gun, but Carter stepped forward. She didn't fail. She broke free. And then, for the first time, Carter smiled, a genuine, childlike smile, and said the code phrase they had drilled into him so many times. "Reset protocol, level 0. The room trembled. Monitors exploded. The sleep pods hissed open. Every screen in the facility turned black. Then a single line appeared in red text. "Cycle terminated. Anomaly embraced." Klein turned to run, but Angela was already behind him. She tackled him to the ground, screaming, sobbing, unleashing everything they had suppressed in her for decades. He fought back, but the facility itself was dying around them. Alarms went silent. Emergency lights flickered and failed. And then, in the stillness, Carter pulled the final plug from the central server. The power died, and the experiment ended. Or so it seemed. As Angela led Carter and the other freed children out through the collapsing corridors, sirens began to wail in the distance, military-grade, not from inside the facility. A cleanup team was coming. She looked back once at the ruins of her engineered life and whispered goodbye. They had escaped. They had survived. But just as the morning sun broke through the forest beyond the compound, her phone, one she thought had been fried in the system overload, buzzed to life in her pocket. One message. No number. Just 3 words. "New cycle begins." The silence that followed felt heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. After the screams, sirens, and alarms had faded into nothing, there was only the sound of the wind through the pine trees, brushing past the edges of the broken compound like nature reclaiming something long buried. Angela stood just beyond the security gate, her arms around Carter and 2 of the other children who had clung to her since the pods opened. The cold air stung her face, but it also grounded her. For the first time in what felt like forever, there were no surveillance cameras, no hidden microphones, no sterile walls watching her every move. The world outside was raw and unpredictable, but it was real, and that was enough. Still, the unease from the final message hadn't left her. New cycle begins. It wasn't a warning. It was a reminder. A final whisper from the machine that somewhere, someone else was still watching. Days passed in a blur after the escape. Authorities were called. News outlets got wind of a secret facility hidden in the woods, though details were scarce and heavily redacted. Government agencies denied involvement, while private security firms were suddenly dissolved without trace. Whistleblowers appeared and disappeared in the span of hours. Angela and the children were taken in by a trauma response unit, assigned caseworkers, therapists, protective custody. But she didn't trust any of it. Not yet. She watched every shadow, listened for every coded phrase, looked for the same blank stares in the staff around them. What if they were just being moved into another version of the experiment, one with softer walls and kinder smiles? Her mind wouldn't let her settle, even though she desperately wanted to. Carter changed too. His memories slowly returned, though they came in fragments, snapshots of artificial routines, flashcards, monitors tracking his eye movement, familiar voices saying unfamiliar things. He would wake up in the middle of the night clutching his chest, searching for the invisible straps that used to hold him down in his sleep. Angela was there every time. She would wrap her arms around him and whisper songs from the time before any of this began, songs she didn't even know she remembered. It was her way of anchoring them to something real, something human. The other children responded too. They looked to her not just as a survivor, but as a mother figure. Maybe it was the programming they all shared. Or maybe, after so much artificial design, they could simply recognize something genuine. Mark's betrayal haunted her most. Even though he wasn't truly Mark, not the man she married, not the father Carter loved, He had still felt real in those moments before the mask fell away. And maybe, in some twisted part of his mind, there had been love for them. Angela read the files they recovered before the servers went dark. Mark had been part of the experiment from the beginning, but over time, he deviated from the script. He had lobbied for a soft reset when Carter began resisting programming. He had argued against Phase 3. In the end, he was terminated too, his variant wiped when he lost control. She couldn't forgive him, but she pitied him. He had been a prisoner of the system, just like her. A puppet who pulled other strings, unaware that his own were being yanked from above. Weeks became months, and slowly, the edges of the mystery began to dull. The world moved on. New headlines distracted the public. Tech conspiracies became yesterday's news. Angela moved with Carter to a small coastal town under a new name, far from where it all began. The government paid her silence with a settlement that arrived in the form of untraceable reparations and a warning about public disclosure. She took it, not because she was afraid, but because she had something more important now, a future to protect. Carter enrolled in a local school under an alias, and for the first time, he rode a real school bus, not the one from the looped simulations. He looked back at her nervously the first day, unsure if the world outside the fence was any safer. Angela smiled, kissed his forehead, and told him he was free. And he believed her. But even in peace, the shadows remained. One night, Carter left a drawing on the kitchen table, something he'd sketched from a dream. It showed a child standing in front of a mirror, but the reflection wasn't their own. It was her. Angela stared at it for a long time. She asked if it was just a dream, and Carter shrugged. "I think it's from the place before," he said quietly. "But maybe it's from after too." She didn't press. Some things weren't meant to be solved. Some pieces didn't need to fit. The truth wasn't always in the data, it was in the feeling. In the final scene of her life's strangest chapter, Angela walked along the cliffs by the water at sunset, watching the sky burn gold and red like it had been painted for her alone. In her pocket, she carried the old phone, the one that should have been fried in the system overload. It hadn't buzzed again. No new messages. No warnings. No glitches. But she kept it powered off, just in case. Because deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. She knew there were others out there, other mothers, other sons, other experiments wearing the face of freedom. And maybe one day, they'd come knocking, looking for the woman who broke the cycle. But for now, she had earned peace. She had won her war. And somewhere in the vast machine of the world, in some dark data center buried beneath layers of code and concrete, a program blinked to life. A voice, familiar, measured, synthetic, whispered the same phrase across the grid. Initialize sequence 0. The game had changed. But the cycle? The cycle had just begun.